Okay, today is August the 7th, the second day of the autumn. Fall season is going to start. My wonderful students, Jason has been working with me since elementary school. And he has always been in my humanity literature high school class group. And he always wants to talk about social issues. And today, it's my privilege to study with him about Rand Paul, this great American politician, maybe the only politician that's worth my respect. And Jason is going to introduce to us this wonderful person, Rand Paul. The floor is yours. Tell us about your understanding about this wonderful person from Texas. Go ahead.
Ronald Ernest Paul, born August 20th, 1935, is an American author, activist, physician, and retired politician who served as the U.S. representative for Texas' 22nd Congressional District from 1976 to 1977 and from 1979 to 1985, as well as for Texas' 14th Congressional District from 1997 to 2013. On 3 occasions, he sought the presidency of the United States as the Libertarian Party nominee in 1988 and as a candidate for the Republican Party in 2008 and 2012. A self-described constitutionalist, Paul is a critic of several of the federal government's policies, especially the existence of the Federal Reserve and tax policy, as well as the military-industrial complex, the war on drugs, and the war on terror. He has also been a vocal critic of mass surveillance policies such as the Patriot Act, and in the NSA surveillance program. In 1976, Paul formed the Foundation for Rational Economics and Education, and in 1985, he was named first chairman of the conservative Political Action Committee, Citizens for a Sound Economy. Both free market groups focused on limited government. He's been characterized as the intellectual godfather of the Tea Party movement, officially fiscally conservative political movement starting in 2007 and popularized in 2009 that is largely against most matters of interventionism. So instead of going to Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and then more recently Ukraine, and then Israel, involving in those conflicts, more like just stick to America. Paul has served as a flight surgeon in the U.S. Air Force from 1963 to 1968 and worked as an obstetrician gynecologist from the 1960s to the 1980s. He is the first representative in history to serve concurrently with a child in the Senate when his son, Rand Paul, became United States Senator Republican from Kentucky in 2011. Ron Paul is a senior fellow and distinguished counsel of the Mises Institute. He published a number of books and promoted the ideas of the economists of the Austrian school, such as Murray Rothbard, Friedrich Hayek, and Ludwig von Mises during his presidential campaign. He has cited President Grover Cleveland as his preferred model of governance. After the popularity and the grassroots enthusiasm of his 2008 presidential bid, Paul announced that in July of 2011, he would not seek re-election in Congress in order to focus on his 2012 bid for the presidency. Finishing in the top 4 with delegates for both races, while winning 4 states in the 2012 primary, he refused to endorse the Republican nominations of John McCain and Mitt Romney in the respective 2008 and 2012 campaigns against Barack Obama. In May 2012, Paul announced that he would not be competing in any other presidential primaries, but he will still compete for delegates in states where the primary elections will have already been held. At both the 2008 and 2012 Republican National Conventions, Paul received the second highest number of delegates behind only McCain and Romney respectively. In January 2013, Paul retired from Congress but remained active on college campuses, giving speeches promoting libertarian conservative ideas. He also continues to provide political commentary through the Wrong Paul Liberty Report, a web show he co-hosts on YouTube. At 81, and despite not running, Paul received 1 electoral vote from a Texas faceless elector in the 2016 presidential election, making him the oldest person to receive an electoral college vote, as well as the second registered libertarian presidential candidate in history to receive an electoral vote after John Hosworth in 1972. Early life education and medical career. Ronald Ernest Paul was born on August 20th, 1935 in Pittsburgh, the son of Howard Casper Paul, 1904 to 1997, who ran a small dairy company, and Margaret Paul, who lived from 1908 to 2001. His paternal grandfather immigrated from Germany, and his paternal grandmother, a devout Christian, was a first-generation German-American. He has 4 brothers. As a junior in the suburban Dormont High School, he was the 200-meter dash state champion. Paul went to Gettysburg College, where he was a member of the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. He graduated with a BS degree in biology in 1957. Paul earned a Doctor of Medicine degree from Duke University School of Medicine in 1961 and completed his medical internship at the Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit and his residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Maggie Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh. Paul served as a flight surgeon in the U.S. Air Force from 1963 to 1965 and in the U.S. Air National Guard from 1965 to 1968. Paul and his wife then relocated to Texas, where he began a private practice in obstetrics and genealogy. One child that he helped deliver was the famous soprano singer Selena Quintanilla. While a medical resident in the 1960s, Paul was influenced by Friedrich Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, which caused him to read other publications by Ludwig von Mises and Ayn Rand. He came to know the economists Hans Steinholtz and Marie Rothschild well, and credited his interest in the study of economics to them. When President Richard Nixon closed the gold window, ended the gold standard, by ending American participation in the Bretton Woods system, thus ending U.S. dollar loose association with gold on August 15, 1971, Paul decided to enter politics and became a Republican candidate for the United States Congress. In 1974, incumbent Robert R. Casey defeated him for the 22nd District. President Gerald Ford later appointed Casey to a Federal Maritime Commission, and Paul won in April 1976 special election to the vacant office after a runoff. Paul lost the next regular election to Democrat Robert Gamage by fewer than 300 votes, 0.2%, but defeated Gamage in a 1978 rematch and was re-elected in 1980 and 1982. Gamage underestimated Paul's popularity among local mothers. I had real difficulty down in Vidore County where he practiced, because he delivered half of the babies in the county. There were 2 obstetricians in the county, and the other one was his partner. Tenure. Paul served in Congress for 3 different periods, first from 1976 to 1977, after he won the special election, as shown before, then from 1979 to 1985, and finally from 1997 to 2013. In his early years, Paul served on the House Banking Committee, where he blamed the Federal Reserve for inflation and spoke against the banking mismanagement, which results in his saving and loan crisis. Paul argued for the return for a gold standard maintained by the U.S. from 1873 to 1933, which you will see more of, and with Senator Jesse Helms convinced the Congress to study the issue. He stood against the reinstatement of registration for the military draft in 1980, in opposition to President Jimmy Carter and the majority of his fellow Republican members in Congress. During his first term, Paul founded the Foundation for Rational Economics and Education, a nonprofit think tank dedicated to principles of limited government and free market economics. And in 1984, Paul became the first chairman of Citizens for a Sound Economy, the conservative political group founded by Charles and David Koch to fight for less government, lower taxes, and less regulation. Classic libertarian ideals. CSC started a Tea Party protest against high taxes in 2002, and in 2004, Citizens for a Sound Economy split into two new organizations, with Citizens for a Sound Economy being renamed as Freedom Works and Citizens for a Sound Economy Foundation becoming Americans for Prosperity. These two organizations will become key players in the Tea Party movement from 2009 onward. Paul proposed term limit legislation multiple times, while himself serving 4 terms in the House of Representatives. In 1984, he decided to retire from the House in order to run for the U.S. Senate, complaining that in his House farewell address, that special interests have placed a concern that the founders had for general welfare. It is difficult for one who loves true liberty and utterly detests the power of the state to come to Washington for a period of time and not leave a true cynic. Paul lost the Republican primary to Phil Gramm, who had switched parties the previous year from Democrat to Republican. Another candidate of the senatorial primary was Henry Grover, a conservative former state legislator who had lost the 1972 gubernatorial general election to Democrat Dolph Driscoll Jr. On Paul's departure from the House, his seat was assumed by former state representative Tom DeLay, who would later become the House Majority Leader. This is where we get to when he joined the Libertarian Party and his ventures within it. So, following the loss of the 1984 Senate race, Paul returned to his obstetric practice and took part in another of other business ventures. Along with his former congressional chief of staff, Lew Rockwell, Paul founded a for-profit enterprise, Ron Paul and Associates, Inc., RPNA, in 1984. With Paul serving as the president, Rockwell as vice president, Paul's wife, Carol as secretary, and daughter, Lori Piet, as treasurer. The company published a variety of political and investment-oriented newsletters, including the Ron Paul Freedom Report and the Ron Paul Survival Report, and by 1993 was generating revenues in excess of $900,000. Paul also co-owned a mail-order coin dealership, Ron Paul Coins, for 12 years with Bud Blument, who continued to operate the dealership after Paul resumed office in 1996. Paul spoke multiple times at the American Numismatic Association 1988 convention. He worked at the Foundation for Rational Economics and Education on such projects as establishing the National Endowment for Liberty, producing the At Issue Public Policy series that was broadcast on the Discovery Channel and CNBC, and continuing publication of newsletters. Paul left the Republican Party in 1987 and launched for a bid for the presidency, running on the Libertarian Party ticket. His candidacy was seen as problematic because of the party's long support for freedom of choice on abortion. Native American activist Russell Means, Paul's rival for notification, emphasized that he was in favor of abortion rights. In a forum held prior to the nomination, Means dismissed the greater funds raised by Paul's campaign, commenting that Means was receiving 10 times more press than the former congressman, and was 10 times, 100 times more effective. On September 25th, 1988, American psychologist and psychedelic advocate Timothy Leary held a fundraiser for Paul, who attended the event. Journalist Deborah Saunders attended and wrote about her experience. In the 1998 presidential election, Paul was kept off the ballot in 46 states, scoring third in the popular vote with 432,179,000 votes, 0.5%. Paul was kept off the ballot in Missouri due to what the St. Louis Post-Dispatch termed a technicality, and received votes there were only written in, just as he did for North Carolina. According to Paul, the presidential campaign was more about attaining office. He sought to promote his libertarian ideals, often to school and university groups regardless of vote eligibility. He said, "We're just as interested in the future generation as this election. These kids will vote eventually, and maybe, just maybe, they'll go home and talk to their parents." Paul considered campaigning for the president in 1992, but instead chose to endorse Pat Buchanan that year, and served as the vice to Buchanan's Republican presidential primary campaign against incumbent President George H.W. Bush. Later congressional campaign from 1997 to 2017. During 1996, Paul was re-elected to Congress after a difficult campaign. The RNC, Republican National Committee, endorsed incumbent Greg Lawland in the primary. Paul won with the assistance from a baseball pitcher, constituent, and friend Nolan Ryan, tax activist, and publisher Stephen Forbes, and conservative commentator Pat Buchanan. The latter two who had run in the 1996 Republican Party presidential primary. Paul narrowly defeated Democratic attorney Charles Lefty Morris in the fall election, despite Morris' criticism over controversial statements in several newsletters that Paul published. From 1998 to 2013. In 1998 and 2000, Paul defeated Lois Neary, a Democratic Bay City, Texas rice farmer and former Matagorda County judge. In the 2008 Republican primary, he defeated Friendswood City Councilman Chris Pettit with over 70% of the vote and ran unopposed in the general election. Mom?